Hey guys, appreciate your patience. Hope you're having a great Sunday evening. Here we are on the AV Experience podcast. It's going to be Jonathan and myself tonight. We've got Ryan. He's with his son is at a championship soccer tournament tonight. So he won't be joining us, but we're going to have a fun time. We'll say hi to some folks in the chat, do a little just kind of some catching up to do, and then we will get to your questions. So if you've got questions tonight, drop those in the chat, and we'll be starring those as we go. We'll be glad to answer those as much as we can with the amount of time that we've got. But hope you guys are doing well. Let me know in the chat where you are watching from. I always like seeing where you guys are at, because we've got an audience that literally is all over the world, which is super cool to me and still just fascinates me to know that we're able to connect and share the same passion and hobby for movies and music and home theater, literally with people all over the planet, man, which is super cool. Jonathan, what's going on, man?
Oh, it's been a good weekend. Nothing
Good.
too outside of the normal, just family stuff, volleyball and, activities with the family, church and whatnot. It's been a nice weekend. Last night, Chris, I think he's in the chat here. I saw him up there earlier. Let's
Yeah.
see where his handle is. He and a bunch of people over from Kansas City group, about 20
Cool.
guys came over, barbecued and watched some
Good.
movies, clips and demo material and played some games.
Yeah.
CACZECH
Yeah.
is the, and he's
He
struggling a
sent
little
me
bit.
he sent me the picture. He's like, "Hey, can I share this?" And I guess I didn't know what he was doing. I'm like, "Yeah, fine." It's me like approving his Kansas City barbecue sauce that he gave me.
He had it there last night. Yeah, that's funny.
I love it, dude. It's Chipotle. I still we cooked some sausage the other night and I use it. So appreciate Chris hooking me up with that. Adrenaline. Man, you need adrenaline? Dude, must have been honestly, it is difficult when you have a bunch of people over and you're entertaining, and sometimes it can be mentally exhausting. So
Yeah, I gotta give props to him too, because we had a huge amount of thunderstorms yesterday. Chris barbecued all that meat out under a tent in the rain. Sent a video. It's pretty funny.
You're the man, Chris.
No doubt.
Super cool, man. Let's add some folks in the chat. JD, good to see you. Steve, Gene, which is Brian. So Brian, man, he's been on a selling spree. He sold his AV10 on Patreon, and then he's got his per listens. He's got those listed. He's upgrading, man. He hadn't even built his home theater yet, but he's still upgrading. It's hilarious. I love it, man. Brian's a good dude. Finster, good to see you, Tyler. Need some raw adrenaline. EpiPens, Mikey says, good to see you, Big Chief. Emaditas, good to see you. Tarhoya. Who else we got? Bruce, good to see you, buddy. Lots of folks in the chat. Fernando. All right, man. So Jonathan, feel free to star some of these if you see questions that come in.
Yeah.
And then we can make sure, because there's only two of us. So sometimes I'll get to talking. I'm not looking at the chat, and I'm not real good at multitasking. So I get distracted really easy. I really think I've got like ADD. There's no doubt, man. I'm telling you, and I don't say that lightly. I really think that I did, even growing up. Back then, of course, they didn't even have a diagnosis for it, but I'm certain I would have been on medicine back then. But now I just deal with it. I just don't get stuff done sometimes because I get sidetracked. So we got folks from Atlanta, Trinidad. Very cool, man. I had some friends in college. I went to Bible college in Newport Richey. Had some folks, sweet folks from Trinidad, man. Some of the nicest people you'll ever meet. Let's see. Brazil. Nice. Monterey. Lots of folks all over the place, man. Super cool. Cayman. I like it. Now, I'm assuming Cayman Islands. I want to get down there. Jessica and I were just talking today. We're like, man, we're just kind of thinking of some places that we want to go. And we've been to the Bahamas and Jamaica. And man, we need to go. We need to experience some other islands. Have you ever been on a cruise, Jonathan?
I have not.
What?
I haven't.
Dude, you have not.
A lot of my buddies are telling me that I need to try it sometime.
You have not lived life unless you've gone on a cruise. I'm telling you, bro. It's one of the cheapest family vacations you can possibly take. I'm dead serious. We have taken our family of 6 on, like, say a 4-day cruise, like I guess 4 nights, 3 days. $200 a person.
Yeah,
That's
that's really
all
cheap.
inclusive, man. You get to visit 2 islands, you know, all your food's included. So heck yeah, dude.
I think our family, and we need to try it sometime just to try it, because I've heard
You
so many
do?
people say that. But our family
Hey,
is more of the nature that we like going to like a state park or national park and kind of camping out and being reclusive, maybe.
sure, but
Versus
it's
all the
still,
people on the boat. That's the thing kind of is a little scary to Megan and I. We're not that kind of that's overwhelming to us to have that many people.
but just going like you can go to the comedy club, or you can go to some. Now the bigger boats have more stuff to do, of course, and usually those are longer trips, 7-day cruises, 9-day, 10-day, whatever. Um, so the smaller boats don't have things like an ice skating rink or a so you don't get to ice skate on it. It's like more entertainment. So they do
Sure.
like a thing, like a show, and then some of the bigger boats have things um, like diving. I mean, they got like a swimming pool and whole dance show, and they dive, and it's pretty cool. So, but again, that's usually the big boat. So in Dallas, see, you guys are from all over the place. Very cool, man. So, like I said, if you got questions, man, drop those in the chat. We're gonna hang out. Probably the first. We'll start off. I'll continue to. What does that mean? Cruises are not the way, Mikey. Where's that band button, dude? I love cruises, man. Nah, it's to me, it's just fun. I enjoy them. I would never ban you, Mikey. Some folks from Maine, London. What's going on, TJ? I love it, dude. That's another place I want to go to, dude. Jessica has family in England, or at least I guess like ancestors, maybe not current family, but we'd love to get over to England. Just kind of do that whole European thing over that direction. Do Paris and do England, and that'd be definitely fun. All right, 4 days long. Funny. All right, cool, man. All right, so here's what we're gonna do. Jonathan, you want to share something? I know a lot of you guys have been asking him about the Arundel. You've got the THX monitors.
The
So
720, 1723.
yeah.
That's right.
So they've got 2 different sizes.
So I did some compression sweep testing. And that's kind of what I want to talk about briefly.
Yeah.
The results were that they couldn't hit reference full range. And so to validate that before I put that out there on the internet, I wanted to get an absolute assurance that my mic was correct. I had a friend come over with his Omni mic. We compared them. These are calibrated mics. They have an individual cal file. They were within a dB. I bought 2 different SPL meters. They're within a dB and a half. So we have a good baseline.
Sure.
I set the volume to 75 dB at the reference tone. The internal test tones on the receiver is kind of a baseline. I'll lower the volume, and that's at main listening volume 0 is where you set your calibration. So your SPL set, there's a 30 dB offset on the Denon or Marantz receiver. I have a Marantz receiver. It dropped it to 30 dB. So that's why you're at 75. This means at 75 that peak volume on any kind of recorded content should hit 105. That's your goal. That's THX reference.
Sure.
At that point, you just lower your main listening volume and you start these sweeps. And so your baseline starts at like 75 or whatever it is. It's immaterial.
Right.
And you rate
start
each
low,
sweep.
don't start too high.
Yep. Turn off all the EQ. There's no EQ. There's no tone controls. There's no nothing. It's just raw signal. The subs are off. The speaker's driving full range. And you raise the SPL 5 dB at a time on the main listening volume. And you do that and you record it. And then you do it 5 dB more and you record it. And you do it 5 dB more and you record it. And when those lines stop raising in parallel, then you know you've hit some sort of compression. A lot of times it's on the subwoofer side or the woofer side because the box isn't big enough ported, and you'll start seeing some compression over there. Not as much of a deal there because most people use subs. So we did see a little bit of that on the Arundels, but I'm not too worried about that at the volumes where I stopped. Where I did start to see stuff, and again, this is only really a matter if you want to go to like THX reference volumes, commercial cinema volumes in your home theater. Right. But the top end starts rolling off at the 20 hertz thing. And so I was just going to show what that means and what this looks like. And this is not to belittle the speakers. It's a design type. We've talked about this before. They have like a single soft dome type. I don't know exactly what kind of driver it is, but those are traditionally not able to hit reference. And so there's not anything really new or surprising here. It's just validating that that's the case. So I'm going to share my screen as soon as I get this pulled up. And we'll talk through. I'll show you what kind of testing looks like and how you can kind of do this on your own.
And even when you show that, Jonathan, kind of maybe explain to those in the chat and those watching this on the replay, like what is compression? I mean, we're going to see it physically happen on the graph, but maybe what is that? So
Sure.
just
Okay, so let me know if you see my screen here.
It's pulling up right now.
Okay.
Yeah, we can see your folder.
All right, let me grab this. And
Okay,
I'm just going to turn this off because I don't know if you can even hear it, but we don't need to hear this. We're just going to look it over. So you got I got a baseline sweep here, and I start recording them. So I'm going to kind of skip through this little bit so we can kind of move forward through this quicker. You can see I've got 3 sweeps here. I've got a baseline sweep at about 75 dB. You can kind of look at that line. This is, and tell me if you can see this okay. Michael, can you see that okay?
Yeah, I can see it.
All right, the speaker's about 10 foot away. And so I've got it's a 5 capture average on each one. So the 75 dB here, and then I raise it 5 dB, and you can kind of see this looks a nice parallel, right? It's a 5 dB distance between them. I do the same test again, 5 dB difference. I do the same test again. You can start seeing a little bit of compression right here, right? This is no longer 5 dB because we were at that line on those intervals, and now we're not at that line. So this is 50 hertz, 40 hertz, 30 hertz. We're starting to get a little compression on the lower end of this speaker. Okay, like I said, you're going to have subs in use, most likely. It's probably immaterial. If we go up another sweep, you're not going to be at here anymore. You're going to be more like here. So every sweep you do higher, it's going to keep dropping that. Again, I don't want to damage these speakers. They're on loan from the company, so I'm not going to push them hard. When I start seeing compression, I'm going to back off.
Yep. And that's typically what you want to do. You don't want to damage your speaker. You're just trying to find, okay, every speaker is going to have some type of limitations. So you're just trying to figure out what are those limitations in the speakers.
So on this right-hand side, you can see I'm pretty good here. It looks like it's maybe a dB or 2 below the line, a dB or 2 below the line. I'm starting to lose ground here. That's only at about 85 dB. I'm starting to lose ground. And up here, this is 90 dB. And I've now lost about 2.5 dB because I'm on this line, and now I've dropped another couple dB from there.
So you're losing some of the high frequencies.
I'm starting to lose the high. And you're going to, the obvious answer, at least the first blush at this, is like, oh, it doesn't matter. It's at 20,000 hertz. Nobody hears that high anyway. And it's true. We don't. I'm middle-aged. I'm 44. I don't hear anything higher than about 15,000 or 16,000 hertz. A younger person hears higher. You can't help it. You will lose that hearing no matter how well you protect your hearing as you age. However, it doesn't stop there. As you start pushing this speaker more towards reference and that tweeter starts getting hot, this pivot point is going to move to the left, and it's going to reduce that to a point where you can start hearing it and will cause some distortion. So here I'm going to show you this next sweep. This is kind of what I'm talking about. So I kick off the sweep again. We see a little bit more compression here, but what I really want to show you is watch how, and I rewinded it just a second, watch how this right-hand side, you see it looks good at first, but every sweep, it starts getting lower because it's getting hot. And that tweeter's saying, look, you're making me uncomfortable. I can't do this. If I continue to play at this level, I could start damaging the speaker.
So Jonathan, you say every sweep. Is this a continual sweep that you've got like on a loop, or what are we doing here?
Yeah, let me turn this up and see if you can hear it if I turn it up. So do you hear, is that picking up on the mic to kind of tell you how the sweeps sound?
Is it that fast though?
Yes, it's like sweep, sweep, sweep.
Why do you do that fast?
That's what this OmniMic software does. So that's a real-time analysis sweep. It's playing a full frequency, like a sine wave that goes all the way up the range from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz.
Okay.
So, and I'm yelling on the thing because I don't have a proper mic hooked up. But that's what I wanted to show you guys, is that as I continue to play this knee where this comes down, right now is about 14,500 where that kind of starts bailing out. If I turned it up another 5 dB, that knee is going to move to the left, and this line, in my previous experience, will start actually intersecting down below the others because that tweeter is really unhappy in that next 5 dB sweep. Now, what I want to show you here is particularly is that's a 95 dB-ish sweep, right? So we're already starting to bow out at 95 dB. Now we're losing 10 dB because of distance, or thereabout. I'm at 10 foot. So if you're at 1 meter, it's going to have more SPL by about 10 dB, maybe a little less than that, but somewhere in that realm. But nobody listens 1 meter away from their speaker. They're usually 10 or 12 feet out.
Right.
So if you wanted,
is correct.
Yeah, they're right here on this left-hand side and right side, and that's 10 foot from the mic position, 10 foot.
Yeah, that's pretty common.
So if you wanted commercial cinema THX reference, you would need to have this whole line uncompressed above this 105 line. And you can see frankly, we're nowhere near there.
Right.
So to do that, you have to have a speaker, and this isn't something everybody wants. A lot of people on here will probably say, hey, look, I never turn mine above -10 or -15 anyway. That's plenty fine for me. I don't need to get that loud. This is for people who really just want to be able to crank it like the commercial cinemas. You would want it to be up here. And your easiest way to get there is pro audio speakers. So if I play the same test with my JBL CBTs that are rated for 125 dB, they don't compress at all. A lot of soft dome tweeter type speakers where they have a single tweeter in the middle, like an MTM type thing, not a coaxial, not a compression driver. When it's just more of a soft dome tweeter, this is kind of typical behavior. I'm not surprised to see this.
Right.
Just the way the design is. So they're not going to be. You wouldn't buy these speakers per se for a commercial sounding cinema because it's not going to do it. But it is a very nice speaker, and I really have enjoyed my time with it. So I'm not saying don't buy the speaker. We're just talking about real world limitations and what they mean and how you can test them yourself.
Now, a couple questions. So Mikey says, what hertz is the graph starting at on the left? It's hard to see.
It is hard to see. So this is 100 hertz. This is 50 hertz. Every line down here represents 10. So 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. And this is down to 30. So 50, 40, 30. The OmniMic's calibrated down to 5 hertz, but there's no point in that for, this type of speaker. It's just not going to do it.
It's not rated down that low anyway.
It's not even going to try. So I just cut that part off. You can use these little arrow keys on the OmniMic to choose your range. And up here is 20,000 hertz. So every doubling is an octave. So 10,000 hertz to 20,000 hertz is an octave. And what's happening is you're seeing that compression start beginning in the last octave, the 10,000 to 20,000 hertz. That's human audible. This is 5,000 hertz. So these are representative of 1,000 hertz, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000, 9,000, 10,000. That's just the scaling the OmniMic uses.
Right.
And I checked both speakers. They both do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that one of the speakers is bad or faulty or anything. It's just a technology limitation. Like I said, I've measured other speakers that do the same thing with soft dome tweeters. So it's just what it is.
And so to answer Will's question, adding more of these monitor speakers doesn't change that, correct?
Yeah, it would change it, but it's not in what you're wanting to do. So like if you say put two of them side by side and you split the power between them, you would get like 6 dB more probably volume by co-locating those things. But nobody really does that because you introduce other things like comb filtering or impedance difficulties and so forth with the speaker. Mm-hmm. And if you're saying like, hey, well, instead of just having 2 in my room, I got 15 in my room because I got a 9.x.6 system. That doesn't matter because the front left speaker itself or any individual channel is supposed to hit that 100 for commercial cinema sound is supposed to hit that 105 dB line. And since you can't do it with one, you can't do it with any of them. So in that context, it doesn't matter from that standpoint. Now, again, I don't want to be negative on these because I was listening to some music today just in 2-channel and really enjoying these speakers. I like them. There's just horses for courses. If you've ever heard that thing, like if you want a particular application, it may be a different product than what another application would be. So for music listening, fantastic. For commercial cinema use, not so much.
Okay. Question here. Jed says, how many cubic feet is your room?
That's a great question. I can give you the dimensions of it. So it's not a symmetric room, so that becomes difficult. But at the front of the room, it's 18 foot wide, and the depth of the room is about 24 feet. And then it breaks off on the left-hand side and becomes a much larger space.
Well,
so
think
the
about
back
this.
of the room is probably 30 foot wide or something.
Let's do your main area. What is it? 18 times how deep?
24. But that 18-foot section is only like 6 foot deep, and then it breaks out to probably 24 foot, and then it breaks out to probably 30 foot. So it becomes complicated.
No, it doesn't. Couldn't you do 2 squares?
Sure.
Or 2 rectangles? Just add the 2
squares.
Yeah. So like if you got the 1 rectangle, and how high is your ceiling?
7.5 foot or so.
Okay. So
but ultimately, and that's fine. You can do the math and so forth, but it won't matter.
Yeah, it's a big room, but like you said, you're measuring from 12 feet or 10 feet.
Yes. It's the distance. So if you had a large room or small room, this isn't going to change in that regard. It's the distance from the speaker to the mic or to your listening position in this case that matters, not the size of the room so much. In fact, where that does matter is, do you see how this is not a real smooth frequency response? How it's got this dip down here and this dip down here? That's room interaction from placement. If I did a near mic measurement, and I think I'll do that when I do my video review and kind of talk about this, I'll do a near mic measurement where I put the mic 1 meter from the speaker, and you'll see how nice and flat this line is.
Takes the room out of the equation.
It takes the room out of the equation for the most part when you're near field with the microphone. So if you measured these ground plane outside, you'd have a nice flat frequency response, because that's how they design these things. You put them in a room and it's anyone's guess based on your placement from your different wall boundaries and so forth. And that's what your audio EQ is supposed to be trying to fix on a traditional speaker. You know, it would say, hey, look, at 3K hertz, we're going to give you a little boost because you're low. Odyssey can boost up to 9 dB, for instance. So it would try to boost out of that. It might do a little cut here because it looks like there's a mode at 5K. So it's going to say, we'll drop you 5 dB here because that's higher than everything else. So this graph not being flat, it's going to be different looking in every room and every placement you put it in, just because that's the room interaction.
So another question too. So these are, so they have THX in the name of the speaker, and so Siphonics Audio says that's why THX has ratings for different volumes of room space. But again, that doesn't really.
It's really about listing position more so.
Yeah, that's more about well.
They're using cubic volume as like kind of a generic guide.
Yeah.
But it's really gonna. I mean, I've done a lot of different measurements. It's really gonna be distance, because think about it. Like, I've taken a lot of my speakers outside and measured, or played movie nights outside in the yard and so forth. At the same volume, they sound relatively the same. If you're 10 foot away, it sounds the same volume as it does inside. Less a little bit of reflections and so forth. But the reflections will actually help the SPL raise and not lower. So the overall volume is not really going to affect these graphs very much.
Okay.
If anything, the larger volume would make them flatter. So you wouldn't have this kind of, because the boundary interactions would be less. Like if I took these in the middle of a gymnasium and played them, this would be a flatter line than it is in my room. And if you put it, by contrast, if I put these in a bedroom that's like 10 by 12, you're going to get more peaks and valleys on that in a smaller room because of boundary reinforcements and boundary interactions. All right, so I'm not watching the questions. Are there any other questions with that? Or
that's what I was looking at. I think everybody. I don't see any other questions in regards to that. So okay.
Yeah, let me while I'm sharing my screen here. Compression sweep testing plus Archaea plus ABS Forum. I can show you, and I kind of did a little bit of this the other week, but I can show you a few other speakers that I've done tests with. So this is a Pro Audio speaker. It's a Mackie C200. At the time, these were $200 speakers. Now, with COVID pricing and the world's gone crazy, they're $350 speakers.
Wow.
But I did the same testing in my room with these, and you can see, all right, look, they're at 105 dB sweep, and they're mostly consistent. There is a little bit of compression here on this last thing towards 20,000 hertz, but where we were at on these Arendelles was at the 95 dB line. There is no compression at 95 dB on those Mackies. Now, again, this is Pro Audio. It's got a compression driver. They're meant to go very loud. That's their purpose.
Crazy loud. Yep.
Yes. And so here's a pair of SVS SCAS01. That's a center channel from an SVS line that's not, it's kind of a mid-lower budget end of SVS product. I don't even know if they make it anymore. I don't think they do, but it's one of my buddy's speakers, and he asked me to do a little testing on it. So we did some testing. So these didn't make it as far as the Arendelles. You can see here, that's only really here's the 95 dB line. And at 95 dB, it's compressing all over the place. That tweeter's saying like, I just can't do it. And look, it's even starting to go, it's the red line. It's actually starting to go lower than the second highest line, and even down below the third line. So as these things start getting hot, that's what happens. This knee starts moving to the left, as I said, and that line starts creeping down. That would be audible, because at 10,000 hertz, we can hear.
Okay.
And then you got some port compression up here.
Yeah.
So sometimes you have to stop before you even get any like lines on the graph that look bad. This was a Behringer B2031A. This is a desktop monitor, if you will. And even though this line doesn't look bad, it actually started doing some very serious port compression, what they call port chuffing. Like you could hear that it was like some sort of big, I don't know, almost like paper rustling or something. Like the woofer was trying to move too much air for the port size. And if you ever heard that, it's not a pleasant sound. So I stopped it because I didn't want to damage the driver at that point. The driver's out of control. It's trying to play below the port tune. It's not a good situation. So in some cases, you know, like this one didn't even make it to, here's a 95 dB line. It didn't have any compression at 95 dB, but it was having compression down here that was very audible. And again, I don't want to damage the speaker, so I stopped. So that's the kind of testing that you can do with these speakers and kind of figure out where the capability lies.
Now on somebody told me this. I was doing a compression test a long time ago, and they said I actually didn't reach the limit of it because their suggestion was don't, because I was running the sweep, let's say down to 5 hertz or 10 hertz, and they're like, if I would have bumped it up to say 20 hertz, and then you add and I forget, is it I always forget the term where you cut off those lower frequencies. Is it a low pass filter or high pass filter?
It'd be a high pass filter.
Okay. So adding like a high pass filter to
Mm-hmm.
trim off some of those, but they said
Mm-hmm.
you would be, if you did that, now you're going to get more overall SPL on the whole thing. So if
Yes,
you have
that's possible. And like in this case, I probably could have done exactly that, put like 100 hertz HPF or something on it, and then
Yeah.
just kept going and see where the tweeter gave out on this
Yeah.
monitor. But in this case, I was just wanting to see what it did. So a lot of my testing is just in like direct mode with no EQ, no nothing. Just let's see what the speaker does raw. The other thing that we had kind of talked about, I had mentioned this to some of the guys last night, is on that. I'm going to go back to the Arendelle. On that Arendelle, you could use like a Cinema X, an X filter, which is basically a roll off starting at about 12,000 hertz that a lot of cinemas use.
Right.
And that would make this not as noticeable because the receiver, here's 10,000 hertz. No, sorry, here's 10,000 hertz. At about 12,000 hertz, it starts rolling off. But at some point, this is still going to come into effect. So maybe it's a little higher, but it's going to come into effect if you want these speakers to be a true cinema roll speaker.
So here's a good question. So AJ James says, how much movie content though is at 15, kilohertz at 105 dB peaks? So like, I guess his question is like, is that really an issue? I know we have the standard and that's what we're trying to achieve at reference volume, but is there content that's playing, and then can we hear that content?
It's a fair question. Or do you think that there would be like only a 15 kilohertz tone at that volume? Probably not. But if you've ever played here, let's answer it this way. A lot of receivers have that X filter that you can turn on and turn off, and that's a very audible difference, even at lower volumes. Like it rolls, it attenuates the high frequencies. So that sort of answers the question of itself. There may not be a specific tone at 15,000 hertz, but you can hear that effectively, that roll off, because it changes the tonality of the speaker. So like if you have a Denon or Marantz or Onkyo, I think they all have that option. You can enable that X filter under the Cinema Sound options or something, and you can hear that difference. And so that'll kind of let you know what we're talking about here. Valid question though.
Cool. Trying to see if there's any more in regards to that. Cool stuff, man. So, all right. So actually I'll come back to that one. So I'm gonna hit a super chat real quick. And then there's a comment that talks about your calibration. So Film 235, appreciate the $5 super chat. He says, love what you do, guys. Thanks. Thank you all for your help. Any chance Jonathan could host a Pimp My Ride manual calibration video with the Omni mic, man?
Sure. I could probably do that sometime.
Do it on your channel, man. So number one, if you guys are not following Jonathan, definitely head over to his channel. I will link it in the chat here. Man, my screen is a little weird because I've got everything kind of shrunk down. Jonathan Von Engel. There we go. I'll drop that in the chat for you guys. Show him some love. There you go. But yeah, man, that'd be super cool. One thing that I would love, and I've mentioned this several times, is one thing, we're getting ready for M-Wave 2024. Excited about that. It's going to be in June this year. I think 21st through the 23rd. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Incredible event. A lot of fun. But one thing that we want to add is more seminars and educational stuff. And these are the kinds of things that I would love to see, whether it's Jonathan or somebody else from the community. It could be a brand that does one of these, but just doing some really practical things that you guys can come learn, get valuable information, take that home, and then implement it into your own home theater. So I would love to be able to see more of that. So we're going to be working hard on that for M-Wave 2024. And We'll just pop that up there. So we don't have registration open yet. So we're still a little ways away from that. There's a lot of stuff we want to do on the website, get it ready. We got some really cool ideas for you, and opening up the home theater tours to more people and making that even a lot more affordable. A game room for M-Wave 3.0. Honestly, we're already looking at that. So we'd love to have a really cool gaming setup for M-Wave for sure. All right. I just want to make sure we didn't miss any through that. Okay, perfect. All right, let's keep going. So Jonathan, if you'll keep an eye on the
yeah, I'm trying to catch up. I'm 5 minutes behind on comments right now, probably.
It's all good. I'm starring them as I go. So all right, so Fernando says, happy Sunday, JBL SDP 58 or Audio Control X7. Man, you're way above my league there, buddy. JBL S. I'm not even familiar with those.
That's a nice processor, but they have a little bit of bugs. I think they share a platform with Arkham, if I remember correctly, that JBL SDP.
That's a 16-channel processor. I'll throw it up here.
I know a couple people who have bought those, and both of them have backed out due to some buggy implementation and moved on. Like, they sound good.
Mm-hmm.
That's
8K 2.1. Yeah, so this is something I have really no experience with, is the JBL synthesis processors. Typically, the home theater tours that I've done, if they've got that 16 plus, they're either running like a Trenov or a Storm. Haven't really run into too many JBL synthesis. And the other one was the audio control. I definitely have no experience with audio control. So unfortunately, I don't have any advice for you on there.
So look at this fella. It's stable now. He owns one of the SDP 58s. That's good.
Cool.
We like to hear that, because
Yeah.
it's not good to relay that a product is buggy, but we also want to be honest when we know that we hear a lot of feedback that products are buzzy. So I'm glad to hear they're straightening it up with firmware.
Yeah, for sure. M. Addis says, can you briefly describe the difference between JTR, Ascendo, Alcons, and Wisdom Audio speakers? Which one each of you would select? So, man,
I've only heard 2 of those, so I could only speak to 2.
I've heard JTR. I've heard a couple of Ascendos. I just heard Alcons audio. I've heard Wisdom audio. They're all different, and that's the crazy thing. These are 4 really incredible brands, high performance. You can get incredible output. There's beautiful detail in each one of those, but they're all going to have a different sound. You know, you've got JTR with a coaxial kind of horn-loaded speaker. Ascendo, they use horns as well. Alcons, they use a horn. I think their compression driver. Wisdom Audio is going to be probably the most different and unique, because they use a line. It's not a line array, line source. Yeah, line source, which is similar to what Jonathan has. You know, they'll have a bunch of tweeters, ribbon tweeters. They've got a bunch of mid-range drivers together. Yeah, my advice to you is go hear as many of those systems, and definitely bring your wallet and maybe your neighbor's wallet with you, because some of those get really, really. I mean, think about it. The Wisdom Audio, in the $1 million Star Wars home theater tour that I did, those speakers are about $20,000 each. So if you've got 9 bed layers, you do the math on that. That's a lot of cash. So definitely way beyond my budget. JTR probably is going to be the most affordable out of those 4. Ascendo has some somewhat affordable stuff, but then they get way on up there. Like the Swans are pretty high end. Alcons, I'm not familiar with their pricing, and Wisdom Audio has a bunch of different tiers, again, depending on what your budget is and what you're looking for. But my advice, literally, I've always just said, look, go hear them. Then you figure out what fits your budget, what sound you're looking for. They all just have different technologies and a different design approach to that. Pedro says, Jonathan, do you have different phase on each of your subs?
So
got
if you're
8
talking about the 0 and the 180 switch that they have, or if you're talking about the dial on the back, no, they're both at zeros. And then I just use distance settings to set my phase. Usually the 0, and we've talked about this before on the podcast, usually the 0 and 180, it's like a toggle button on some subwoofer amps. That's
Mhm.
not going to be accurate enough to do what you need to do. The easiest way to do it without having gear, like a calibration mic, an Omni mic, and kind of doing your own measurements, is to let your auto EQ and your processor set the distance. And generally, that's accurate enough to be enjoyable.
Mhm.
You can maybe fine tune a little bit better if you have, a calibrated mic, REW, Omni mic, that type of thing. But just 0 and 180 and hoping that's good enough is not going to get you there. That's not what you want to do. So the answer is yes. There's different phase on each of the subs, but only in banks. So my front 5 subs are treated as 1, and my rear 3 are treated as 1. And that distance is definitely different between the two based on the AVR settings.
Yeah. So John says, would adding a third sub help fix a null? So null is like a lack of bass. Where my main listening position is, I currently have 2 Stark Audio SW15s. One's in the front left, one's in the back right. So if he adds a third one, the question is that going to fix his null? And my answer would be, it doesn't automatically mean it's going to fix it. You're definitely going to need to time align those. You may have to EQ those, but will it give you the ability to better flatten that frequency response? I believe so. So Jonathan, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you mean you're right. It's a generic answer, but it's a generic question because we don't have the specifics on distance and borders and all that kind of thing. We have told this story before. There's a guy in Kansas City here who bought a third SVS subwoofer, and when he got it all together, he's like, "This isn't any louder. I don't think this is even any better." Well, I went over to his house with my Omni mic, and we were measuring it, and the third sub he added actually lowered the over volume of the other 2 because now it wasn't in phase anymore, and he
They're
didn't.
fighting each other.
Yes, so 3 subs was worse than 2 subs. Well, you got to be careful of that. So if you don't have measuring gear, or you're not going to be willing to intake that process, then make your front left and your right equal distance from your main listening position and set them on bank 1, subwoofer output 1, and then make your third subwoofer output 2, assuming they're both distinct subwoofer, independently controlled, independently EQ'd subwoofer outputs. That will generally work. But if you try to put like a front and they're not equidistant from the main listening position, and you mix and match, you're not going to have them in phase. It's going to fight each other. It's not going to be good.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, and this is what Mike was talking about, every sub you add should make a more uniform frequency response across the listening position, because every sub you add, and there's a Harman Kardon white paper on this. It's pretty interesting to look at. Google Harman subwoofer white paper and you'll find it. It's a PowerPoint presentation. It talks about the more subs you add, the more native perfect your frequency response is to that of a single sub on outdoor ground plane.
Yeah.
So effectively, they said if you had infinite subs, if you lived in a cube of subs, like subs were all sides of you, your frequency response would be as flat, as perfect looking as a single sub in a perfect situation.
Yeah.
So there's no real disadvantage to adding more subs besides spending money. But when you're talking 1, 2, 3, 4, there's still going to be modes and nulls. The more you add, the less modes and nulls you have.
Yeah. And I like what Chris says here. It'll pop up here in a second. There we go. He says also REW is your best friend here. I've always been an advocate. If you don't have a way to measure it, you're literally guessing. You're just throwing stuff in your room. You're throwing money into a problem and you're hoping that it's going to fix it. But until you actually can do what Jonathan showed us earlier, use REW, use Omni mic, use some kind of measuring tool, calibrated microphone, measuring software, so that you can physically see that frequency response and see what's happening in the room. Because when you add that third subwoofer or that fourth subwoofer, when you do, you take a measurement with the 3 and then add the fourth and take a measurement with the fourth. If that line did not go up, then there's some issues there, and you've got to fix those, or they're now fighting each other. They're basically, one is kind of going this and the other one's going this, and then they cancel each other out, and you're losing performance. You're not utilizing everything. So we've got MSO, we've got REW is free. The calibration mic is not free, but you're still talking what, $120 maybe? Dayton makes one.
Omni mic's $300, and you're probably looking at Yeah, I mean, unless you buy it from Mini DSP, I think Mini DSP has it for 100, but you're about 120
Yeah.
bucks probably.
Yeah, so somewhere around there. So anywhere between 100 and say $100 to $300 roughly,
Mhm.
depending on what level of mic you want to get. Yeah, the time is definitely what's going to um, it definitely takes some time. But the good thing is there's some great resources out there. So you can, and they're free. So they're on YouTube. People are showing you how to take these measurements. So good question there. Let's see. Chris says fun item that was played at last night was the DTS app on Xbox, which is also on a PC. That's one of the coolest ways to test your speakers panning and levels. Very cool. Joe the
Yeah,
French.
that was actually. Let me elaborate on that a little bit because
Yeah.
I was there for some of that last night. So Chris has installed 6 ceiling speakers, and his room is rather small, so they're back to back to back, like they're touching each other. The ends of them are touching, and so straight line basically over the listening position, a little forward to listening position. And so we were experimenting last night. He was telling us that it was a big upgrade between 4 and 6, and we were experimenting between 4 and 6 just to kind of see. He'd let us have the remote. We were doing an amp assign between 7.4 and 7.6. And then we were using this DTS app to kind of move the little object around in space with the Z-axis all the way up so it was on the ceiling and kind of see how they panned. And that was an interesting little experiment. I'm sure there's different content that kind of reveals it different ways. To my ears, I don't know that I would be able to tell you which one was which in that app. Because if you're sitting in that middle seat, and we kind of talked about this before too, speakers like to image together. So that's how stereo pair work. If you have a stereo pair left and right, that's why you can hear a center channels because they're imaging together if they're set on that properly. So in the instance that you only had 4, it's kind of imaging that middle speaker from the front top and the rear top. Now, what was kind of interesting also as well, why we've talked on the show, phantom channels aren't that great for people that are off center seat. If you're sitting left, right, back, anywhere else that's not center seat, phantom doesn't work. You hear the speaker that's closest to you. Same sort of thing happens in a room. If you're expecting that imaging to work between speakers, it's really only going to work in a particular position. Otherwise, you're going to hear the speaker that's nearest you, like if the rear speaker's playing. By having 6 speakers up there, it kind of nullifies that and lets you hear that object move even if you're not in the exact proper position. So that was kind of interesting to play with. I was glad Chris let us have some hands-on time with that. And Bob was there last night. He was like trying to figure out whether he wanted to go between 4 and 6, and that helped him make some decisions too. So interesting stuff.
Yeah. Here's a good question real quick. C-Big says, is there a particular Omni mic that you recommend? They're coming out with a new one, right?
Yeah, so right now there's not any for sale because the version 2 is out of stock, and the V3 was supposed to come in September. I called Parts Express and asked.
Yeah.
They said it would be in stock in September, but here we are on the 24th, and it's not. I just checked today.
Have you checked with Omni Mic to see if they would send you one?
No, I haven't reached out to them at all.
You ought to, absolutely. You send them an email and say, Youthman says he needs one. I don't think that really matters, but no, seriously. I mean, it'd make some great content for your channel. So, but yeah, man. Worst they could say is, no thanks. They may be like, dude.
They'd be like, who are you? Who are you?
Yeah. Just show them. Say, hey, we talk about it on the podcast all the time. I use your mic. I'm a big, fan of it. I've owned it. I love what you bring to the table. I'd love to see, this one firsthand and share it with my audience and share it with Michael's audience.
Sure.
Throw my name out there if I can help anyway.
Hey, C-Big, one last thing. This is from Parts Express. It's Dayton Audio partnership. So if you go to Parts Express and you search OmniMic, you'll see a V2 that's discontinued and you won't see a V3 yet, but keep an eye out there. And I recommend the OmniMic personally. I really like it. It's a good product. It's very fast to set up. We've talked about that before.
Oh, sure. All right. Joe the French Canadian says, wonder if near field subwoofer profits more for movie listening than music listening. On a 7.2.4 with 2 SB3000 subwoofers, I'm more focused on music listening than movies. What say ye, Jonathan?
Man, I think it's great for both. Yeah. So I'll give you some examples. There are frequencies in songs that you probably have never noticed or realized before. Here's a prime example. I played Halo when I was a kid. Who didn't? On Xbox. The Halo app or the Halo song, the main theme from the original game from the middle 90s or whatever. That popped up on a playlist, and I'm sitting there in my main listening position, and my near field 18s are playing, and darn it, if there isn't some sort of really deep wobble that just makes you smile, and the Halo theme that you would never notice without near field subs. I have 8 18s in here. You can't feel that unless it's near field, which is why I'm a big advocate of near field. So I'm getting this really low, wowing wobble coming from that Halo theme song. And yes, that's music. That's something new and fun. Absolutely.
Yeah. Dan Jones says, okay, long question. I'm convinced the reason we tune for one seat, I'm thinking seat, is because we don't use full range speakers in surround sound. We can't phase time align all the speakers to the subs. What do you guys think?
I'm trying to understand this question.
Yeah, I'm reading it again. The reason we tune for one seat is because we don't use full range speakers in surround sound, because normally we're using a subwoofer. I wouldn't think that. I mean, all right, so here's the thing. There's probably two schools of thought. I don't tune my system for 6 seats. And the primary reason is because I'm the one that's in there most of the time. I'm the one that really cares about it. And anytime I have a guest over, like if Jonathan came over tomorrow, he's sitting in my seat. I'm sitting in the one next to him, so now Jonathan doesn't really use tuning in a way because he's got EQ turned off, and he just lets his speakers, give a good seat to seat response. Now subwoofers, what do you do with subwoofers?
Yeah, I mean, I think I understand this question enough to answer what he's asking. The problem doesn't go away by using full range speakers. Just like subs, they still have to be time aligned. And they're still going to be time aligned for more particular a single seat. The difference that Michael's talking about between specifically tailoring for the MLP and not is that, that graph we showed with the Arundel's, how it had those dips and modes and nulls, like it wasn't a flat frequency response. EQing for a single seat, like this main listening position right here, is going to try to make a flat line in that seat. So you saw, and I could bring up the picture again, but let's go by memory. At 3000 hertz, it was like 7 dB down. So you would need to raise 3000 hertz by 7 dB for this seat in this middle seat to be as best it could be. So if Michael's saying I tailor for one seat, that's what he's doing. He's raising that 3000 hertz for 7 hertz, that 3000 hertz for 7 dB. But what about this seat? Does it need 7 dB at 3000 hertz? It may already, because of the room boundary interactions, it may already be positive at 3000 hertz. So now you're adding 7,000. I'm sorry. You're adding 7 dB at 3000 hertz for this seat. And now they're like 10 dB hot at that point. And so now it sounds kind of shrill in that seat. So it's a choice, right? You're either going to EQ for one seat at the detriment to the other seats in your room, or you're just going to let the speakers play raw and deal with the room modes interactions in the room as they happen.
So this kind of brings up a good question. Okay, so I've heard of people that are trying to EQ across all listening positions, but the reality is you can't take, let's say for instance, I use a Marantz AV7706. It has Odyssey room correction. When you place the Odyssey mic, you're not supposed to move that mic more than 2 feet from the main listening position. So you're calibrating that system right there. Same thing with Direct Live. You're not moving it. You're not placing it over here in seat 1, then putting it in seat 2, putting it in seat 3. The room physically, or the EQ software physically can't do that effectively. So if you're wanting to do that, how would you even do that? Do you have to manually do that?
So I disagree with one thing you said here, and we'll talk it through.
Sure.
Odyssey is doing nothing more than averaging those captures. And I'm not going to speak for all the different auto EQ platforms because I don't know them.
Yeah.
But Odyssey sets its distance from the very first from the very first sweep.
That's an important one.
So that's where you're getting all your specific speaker distances, and then it's just averaging them. So it has up to 8 things that it takes, 8 positions. It's just going to average them. So if I want to average my room, I can put it in the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth seat, and it's going to take a composite of all those and then apply EQ to the composite. And that's going to get you the best for the room. The reason they say don't do that, and the reason they say just 2 feet apart, is
Okay.
because they have to accommodate for smaller rooms. And remember, I talked about with smaller rooms, boundary gain interactions are worse, right? You get
Okay.
more peaks and nulls.
Sure.
Your main listening position is typically going to be the closest to the center of the room, and so have the least of those.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you had a small room and your couch is up against one wall, and you measure
Right.
it in all 3 positions on that couch. One of
Sure.
those measurements is going to be trash. I mean,
Yeah,
it's going to
exactly.
throw off everything else. So
Yeah.
Odyssey's like,
It's hard to EQ for that.
yeah, they're watering it down, and they're saying, like, here's the instructions for all. We got to catch all everybody. We don't want to go into the technicalities of this.
Sure.
Only put it in the middle seat and only go 2 foot away, because that's going to be most likely to be the best measurement for that seat and have the best
Sure.
experience. If you have a big room, if you had an auditorium, you
Right.
would want to measure in every seat. That would be ideal in your main listening area.
Okay. Interesting. And see, again, I'm not the guru, man. I love learning. But I'm one of those guys, like, I'm a rule follower. So if I'm going through Odyssey and it's like, hey, put this thing no more than 2 feet away, I'm like, all right, I'm going by the rule book, but I'm getting out the tape measure and I'm putting it right there. I'm serious. That's me. So definitely, that's pretty interesting. I'm curious, you guys in the chat, if you have Odyssey or even Direct Live, do you place the mic in one general location, or do you put it in every seat? Let me know in the chat. I'm just curious. We've got 150 people in this conversation. I'm just curious. Or do you not use any EQ? There's definitely some in that camp. So,
man, I'm like 10 minutes back on the comments at this point.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. So just curious. So we'll keep rolling through here. Jason says, hey guys, I'm curious about your opinion on what would you want to see in a home theater store. So let's just say like a home theater showroom, like an Audio Advice, a Circuit City back in the day, Best Buy, those types of things. What would you guys do to showcase products? So if I own my own store, I mean, to me, I would do exactly literally what we're doing at M-Wave. Number one, I would put I would have rooms that are full Dolby Atmos experiences from different brands. And ideally, it's kind of hard to switch between multiple speakers and multiple brands. And probably it's going to be difficult to do that anyway, but at least have some full rooms, because what we found at M-Wave is half the people that attended M-Wave, and I even asked this at Audio Advice Live when I was on one of their home theater panel discussions, is how many of you have never experienced a home theater apart from your own? And half the people in attendance in both of those events said, that's me. Then I asked, how many of you have never experienced Dolby Atmos? And half the attendance at Audio Advice Live as well as M-Wave said, yes, that's me. So if I owned a home theater showroom, let's just call it that, I would absolutely have home theater experiences. So you could experience what a home theater could sound like, and you can envision that in your home, in your space. I might even go outside the box and do, again, kind of what we do at M-Wave. I want people to experience, let's say I've got projectors that I'm selling. I want you as a consumer to be able to see this brand right next to this brand, because that way you can decide there's no perfect projector. And so, but you get a chance to look at both of them and go, okay, well, this one costs this price and this one costs this price. So which one fits better my budget? This one does this better, but this one does this better. And then you decide what's important to you as a consumer. So I would probably want to do some things like that. I've never seen that done in a showroom kind of place. They'll do it with speakers. They'll have Bowers and Wilkins and Martin Logan and Kef, and you can kind of A/B switch those sometimes in like a 2-channel setup. But I've never seen a showroom be able to do that with projectors. So I think that would be kind of cool. But I don't know, Jonathan, if you had your own home theater store, what would you want to do?
I think that's right, to have good demo rooms. The problem with doing your demonstrations is if you have different products on there and you're trying to like showcase, you're probably going to end up selling one product, or a whole lot of one product and not so much of the other ones. So I How would
I
you
don't know.
conquer that?
Well, think about this. Again, part of that depends on budget
Mhm,
because, and reason why I'm saying that is I worked at Circuit City back in the day. I was in the
mhm,
home theater department. The main three was Polk Audio, Bose, those cute little dual satellites.
mhm,
And I think we had one, maybe it was Infinity,
mhm.
possibly. And those each had three different, I mean, like the
Very,
people
very
doing this
different.
different audiences, different
Mhm,
sounds, different capabilities, and different price points. So
mhm,
again, the consumer that's coming in, they may look at the Bose system and go, I want that. Or the wife says, I want that because they're small and cute and we can hide those. You
mhm,
can't do that with a big, bookshelf speaker, Infinity, or even the Polk Audio, even though they had the little satellites, they were still twice as big almost. So I think, yeah, Boston Acoustics, that was a big brand back then as well. So, I think you can still have some comparisons. Again, at M-Wave, we had an Epson right up against it was either a Sony or a JVC.
mhm,
And I still remember that conversation. A guy came up after the demonstration and the comparison, and he came up and he said, Michael, I've got everything I need out of this event. If I don't see anything else, he said, I'm buying the Epson. He said, I know that the black levels are way better in the JVC
mhm,
and the image looks better on the JVC, but dadgummit, that thing fits my budget a whole lot better and it's gorgeous.
mhm,
If I didn't look at the JVC and I'm just looking at this image, that thing's phenomenal, the
mhm,
LS 12,000.
mhm,
And again, just because something's better doesn't mean it's the best fit for somebody because
mhm.
you always have style, you have feature set, you have price points, and so forth. So
Do you
I think,
remember at like Best Buy and some of the different places where you could push a button and listen to different speakers, like especially in the car audio
yeah,
section?
yeah, speaker
That kind
selection.
of setup is excellent. And then
Yeah.
like what you guys did with the M-Wave with the processors, switching the same speaker
Mhm.
system between 4 different processors, that's awesome. That would
Yeah,
be that's how to run it.
sure.
Just what you did at M-Wave was a
Yeah.
fantastic showcase.
Yeah, so we're trying to do some of those things to give you, the consumer, everything you need to make better buying decisions for your. We're not trying to at Mway, man. We're not trying to sell anything. Like I'm not trying to say, hey, you guys need to go out and buy a JVC because I own a JVC. I want to show you what's out there. I want to show you this year some ultra short throw projectors because I realize not everybody can run a regular long throw projector in their setup. Maybe you got a ceiling fan right in the middle, makes it kind of hard to kind of put a projector and shoot underneath that thing. So maybe an ultra short throw up at the front of your room would work out better. So we're just trying to give you some enough information that you can make the best buying decision. So, but we'd love to have you at M-Wave 2025, 24. I'm already jumping ahead a year. Pedro says, Jonathan, do you have different oh, we already said that. Well, I guess that's a different question. Do you have different phase on each of your subs? Have two front? Do you recommend zero? Yeah, so he's got one maybe in the front, one in back,
Zero on both and let the processor calibrate it from there.
so it can handle it.
Yeah.
Okay. We've always been told that rule, like, hey, if you got one in front, one in back, one's going to be out of phase. Again, if you got a mic, technically you could put them both to zero, measure it, set
Yeah.
one to 180, measure it. Which one gets you more bass response?
Yeah, but neither of them are going to be optimal. I mean, it's just it'd be like having a lucky star fall on the head to have it be 0 or 180, right? Because there's all those other percentages
90,
between
maybe
that.
45. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
so you need to have more granular adjustment than 0 180. If you
Yeah.
don't have any distance settings on your
Very-
receiver, maybe it's better than nothing, but it's not
Mhm.
ideal.
Yeah. Ideally, instead of just that little switch 0 to
Mhm,
180, you want what they call a variable. So
mhm.
it can go from 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, all the way up to 180.
Yeah,
That's a
0
lot.
on both, and then let your processor calculate the distances.
Cool. I like it. Finster Tyler says, hey, Jonathan, did those foam tiles on your front wall continue behind your screen?
No, but there's something behind my screen. So I have the foam tiles. My arm's in the way. Let me try the other hand. How about this? So I have the foam tiles on the sides of the front screen, and behind the screen is something called Certainty Theater Black F tile. And it is a commercial tile that has a 0.7 NRC. It's also what's on the ceiling up here. So they're 2x4 panels. I just tacked them on the wall with like adhesive spray. And so behind the entire length of the front screen, with the exception of the speaker cutouts, is that Theater Black F tile.
Just reading through some comments here. You're right. It's hard to talk,
I can't do it.
answer the comments, and then also read new ones. So if I miss you,
I think
uh,
I'm finally caught up, but we're
okay.
not caught up with the starred questions. So
No, definitely not. Yeah. All right. So AJ James says, how much movie content though is at? Okay, we already hit
I think
that
we
one.
got that one.
Yeah. Mike Haneke says, I have a direct question. I don't like the interaction direct has with my subs. I spend all this effort time aligning and EQing them through the mini DSP only to send them off to direct and say, fix this crap. What is going on?
I have almost zero experience with Dirac, so I'm not the guy to answer this question
Yeah.
to.
I think I've reviewed 2 products with Dirac. One was in a living room setup. One was in my home theater. I had the HTP one. So I have limited experience with Dirac. I do have the, no, I was about to say the Anthem AV70, but that's ARC. That's not even Dirac. So I've really only had 2 units that I can recall that had Dirac. So I'm definitely not an expert on that. The cool thing is with those types of platforms, you can send that off sometimes to the brand, like you said, and see if they can tweak it. But I wish I could offer more assistance to you, brother.
Mike, you might ask Ryan when he comes back in. He's been playing with Dirac quite a bit with his bass, and he also has said he doesn't really like the interaction in his room with his, although he's got like 5 subs at this point, so it may be more than what it's built to do. But he'd be the better person to ask on that. Sorry, we just don't have enough experience to advise you.
Yeah. So he was saying, can you bypass the subs through Dirac? Can I close all the curtains off on that group? And again, I just don't know enough about it on what its capabilities are. John Lara says, Jonathan, any measurements on clips?
Oh man, I can't universally answer this. Yes, over the years, I've probably been in like 100 different home theater rooms, and a lot of the times when we go on crawls and stuff, I bring my Omni mic and I'll just ask and I've talked about this before. I'll ask those, hey, do you want a freak response capture your room? And a lot of the guys are like, yeah, I've never had that before. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Pop in the CD, play the track, get a freak response. So yes, I've done that with clips. I don't have any compression sweep testings on clips, but I will say this. A lot of the clips, and I'm not going to say all the clips because there's a lot of different clips out there and all different capabilities. But a lot of the clips I've noticed, and just like we talked about, you can hear that compression if you start going towards reference volume and you're listening to a soundtrack and it starts sounding, I'll describe it as like maybe a little bit of tin sounding or a little bit of metallic sounding that starts happening, almost like a lead-filled muffledness that starts happening as those compression sweeps would start looking bad on the upper end. You can hear that on the lower, I'll put it this way. You can hear that on the lower end clips as you try to go towards reference because they're not capable of doing full reference either. I don't know where that stops. Like the Scalas, those would probably be reference capable. I mean, the Clips has a lot of different lines, right?
They were 104 dB with one meter.
So no problem with that kind of thing.
Easy.
Yeah. So I mean, it's going to depend on what clips you're asking about.
Yeah. Their budget. Yeah. I've never measured their entry level. Like they call them reference, but they're basically the Synergy series kind of rebranded in my opinion. But yeah, the RF73s, they're like 101, even if they're, because some people say, oh, clips inflates their sensitivity. Okay. Even if it's by 3 dB, you're still easily hitting reference because they're rated at 101 at 1 meter. So
I have listened to Clips Palladium, which are one of their higher lines. I think it's in the higher end.
Yeah,
And
they don't sell those anymore, I don't think.
I feel like I have a pretty good ear for this kind of stuff after doing it as long as I have, and I can hear those in a typical size home theater start compressing at about -4, -5, -3 dB towards reference, like getting close to reference. They start their tonality changes, and that's what that compression sweep reveals. If you listen to a speaker and you go all the way up to reference 0 and your stuff's calibrated right, there won't be any tonality change. It'll just sound as clean as it does at lower volumes, at the higher volumes.
Yeah.
And if your speaker is compressing or having some issues, it'll start changing pitch. Like, hey, I like it at -6 or I like it at -8, but if I go to -4, it sounds muffled or like tin filled or the dialogue's hard to hear.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff is revealing, and that's what you would see on the sweeps. And the Palladium, I bring that up because I know that's a higher end Clips. They did that.
Yeah. So this I was gonna pull up. Stop. I was just curious, like if they were the same, like sensitivity. So we're a little different here. So these are, or is that 99 dB is what they claim at 1 meter.
Yeah, and you're right. That should be plenty, but that's not the ones he had. Like the ones that I heard with platings were like smaller, little bookshelf ones or something,
Yeah,
not those huge things.
Yeah, that was their basically their flagship Palladiums. So they were pretty stinking expensive there. But yeah, I'm not sure they make those anymore.
They're a good looking speaker in person.
Yeah.
But I was not. The owner, I told him this in person, so I can say that publicly here. I was a little disappointed in the sound on those, frankly, as he tried to go up to reference volume to show what they could do, and they weren't happy.
So speaking of clips, Jonathan, maybe you can answer this. Would having 3 reference Premier 504 center channels, so these have a tweeter and 4 mid-range drivers. So there's a if it's horizontal, you have a tweeter and then 2 and then 2. So if he takes that and rotates it vertically, so it's standing straight up and down, would that make a good LCR?
So that's not a terrible idea, depending on the dispersion patterns. That's what's going to get you. A lot of times they'll say an MTM design, especially if it's a two-way, will sound better in a vertical orientation because the MTM has its own problems, especially if it's two-way. I think those Clipses are 2.5 way, if I remember right, the RP504. So
I don't know if that one is. All right, so here's what it looks like. Let's see. I don't know if it'll tell us on here.
90
so you got
by 90.
90.
So you're not losing anything there.
Yeah, it doesn't matter which way you change that. Let's say I'm looking for what Jonathan's talking about is the crossover. Is it a 2-way, 2.5 way? It definitely is not a 3-way design. But a lot of times on the bigger ones like the RC64, that was I think a 2.5-way crossover.
Stuff I've read over the years is if it's a two-way, a lot of times it will actually sound better in vertical. So on its face, I don't see a problem with what you're suggesting here.
I'll look at the manual.
You wouldn't lose any dispersion pattern. Your comb filtering issue as far as left to right would disappear, and vertical comb filtering isn't as noticeable to our ears typically because we're not doing this, but you easily do this. So comb filtering is when the sound delay from every speaker, because they're different distances, hits your ears at different times, and you hear it. You can hear it if you're attuned to it. I'm not sure how legitimately real world it is, but if you're attuned to it, you can hear it. So on a horizontal speaker, get my hands in frame. On a horizontal speaker, you got 4 drivers and they're at different distances. And as you do this, it's going to sound, if there's comb filtering to be heard, you're going to hear it. If it's vertical, the comb filtering is in a vertical orientation. So in order to hear it, you'd have to be doing this. And nobody does this when they're listening to movies. So that's why a vertical orientation is not as troublesome with multiple drivers in a two-way crossover as it is horizontal.
So they are saying it's a 2.5. So if we're looking at this right here, because I didn't find anywhere that it mentions whether it's 2. So we see 2 different crossover frequencies. We got one at 650 hertz and one at 1950. So would that represent a 2-way or 2.5-way?
Yeah, it should, because otherwise you just have a single one.
A single one if it's going to be. So
yeah, like 1800 hertz or 1950 in this case. That's correct. It could also indicate a 3-way, but they usually would advertise it if it's a 3-way because that's kind of like a luxury functionality.
Yeah, most clip speakers are not 3-way. Some of their older, the KLF series, like the KLF 30s were a 3-way. I'm wanting to say the Palladium series might be a 3-way. Definitely a lot of their Heritage series. So those were 3-ways, like the little Scalas. So good questions, man. MRS says, what shows in addition to M-Wave can I visit to listen to home theater speakers? As far as I know, CETA is not open to the public. I visited ISE in 2022 and a few home theater experiences were there. So the short version of that is one of the main reasons why we started M-Wave is because there isn't anybody. There's not a show that I'm aware of that is home theater centric. There are a lot of great shows out there that have some elements of home theater. Axpona will have a couple of demo rooms maybe there that's home theater, but it's primarily a 2-channel setup. I went to Florida Audio Expo here in Tampa. That is all 2-channel, and SVS was the only home theater setup there. Let's see, Audio Advice Live, incredible show. Love going to them. Appreciate everything they're doing in the space. but still kind of the same thing. A lot of 2-channel, some home theater. We're trying to flip that script, and we're mainly focusing on home theater because we're trying to fill a void, what I believe is a void in the home theater space. And that's to provide just some really great home theater experiences. You're right. Cedia is not open to the public. You pretty much have to be an integrator, like a custom integrator. You have to know somebody in the business, and they can kind of get you a badge under their business, or a content creator like myself, media, those types of things. So Cedia typically isn't open to the public. But again, even at Cedia, there are hundreds and hundreds of vendors, and what were there, maybe 4, 5 theaters in that out of hundreds. So again, there's nobody focusing on home theater, and so that's really what we're trying to bring to the space. So, but man, we'd love to have you. I don't know where you're located. Sounds like if you went to ISE, you might even be overseas. We've got some folks that have traveled as far as last year, or this past year, basically in 2023. We had some guys from, he says, then M-Wave it is. I love it. We'd love to have you. We had some folks come from Canada. We had some folks come from Hawaii. And then I had a gentleman not too long after M-Wave, and I started pumping out some videos from it. He said, Michael, let me know as soon as you have the dates, because I live in Finland and I'm coming. So that'll be super awesome. So definitely folks all over the world are saying this is definitely unique. We're trying to provide experiences you just can't get at any other show. So another question, he says, Jonathan, the Arendelle monitors are very heavy. So what stands are you using for them?
So those are monoprice stands. They're steel with glass top. They look pretty nice, but I bought them 10 or 12 years ago, so I have no idea if they're still out there. You can move on, and I'll see if I find them. I'll put them in chat.
I reviewed a pair of monoprice, but they did not have a glass top. They're just aluminum or steel or something like that. What frequencies felt with near field subs?
So we already talked about that a little bit. Is this the same series of questions, or a little different? And you can, man, that's all up to you. We were talking about this at the meet last night over at Chris's place. Some of the guys said, hey, I don't like my near field subs playing over 60 hertz. I think Bob was saying that. I have mine crossover at 60 hertz. I said, I run mine all the way up to the crossover point, and then it's doing the same thing as my front subs. I don't tailor it. I like it to have a little bit higher. You can feel any of it. The kick drums feel like super impressive and just bam in your back, and the low frequencies cause like a wobble effect, which is eerie. So all frequencies, there's not a limit there. It's what you like, like where you like it to cut off. I've noticed too high of frequencies with some of the near field transducers, tactile transducers especially, make like a buzzing sensation, almost like your teeth are buzzing, and I don't like that. So like with butt kickers and so forth, I throttle it. I use a low pass filter to say on mine it's 42 hertz. I don't want I want frequencies above 42 hertz rolled off. Play with it, man. There's not an answer for this. It's for everybody.
Not a one size fits all.
Right.
So M. Addis says, then M-Wave it is. And I love it. He's coming from Saudi Arabia. That would be awesome, dude. We'd love to have you. I love one thing that I'm really trying to do with my channel and with M-Wave is just to create community and build community from all walks of life. That's super cool, man. I'm really excited. Let's go back up here. All right. John says the calibration mic that comes with my Emotiva processor looks a lot like an Omni mic. I have the calibration file for the Emotiva mic as well. Are they comparable on quality and accuracy? So his Emotiva mic that comes with it, is that comparable to an Omni mic since it looks like it?
I'm going to do a quick web search and see if I can get you the answer. I don't know it off the top of my head.
Yeah. I'm not familiar with Emotiva calibration mic. Let's see what it even looks like.
If it's a batch calibration file, as this 2020 post from Keith L on the Emotiva says, that they're basically giving you a batch calibration file,
there we go.
It's not going to be as accurate as like a calibrated U mic or Omni mic. If it's an individual cal file, like you got a unique code and they're supposed to be calibrated for it, then it would probably be similar. I don't know the answer off my top of the head, and I'm not sure I can find it so quick, but we'll look.
That's what it looks like. Really, dude? You got to send me an ad. So they've got their own little microphone. Oh, you didn't even see it. I had it blown up.
Is it pretty similar to that UMic 1 that's pictured a little bit to the left? Is that true on your screen there?
Honestly, I don't know.
The people in the chat might know the answer to this.
Say it again.
I have never owned an Emotiva processor, so I have not researched that degree.
So back in the day when I did the I had an RMC one that had this thing called EmoQ, and I think they brought it back. It wasn't that good though. I don't even remember the microphone. I don't think it looked like that though. So, all right. No, nothing says for time aligning my sub and butt kicker. Is there anything else to consider aside from a mini DSP? Do you need anything else?
No, I mean that should be good. Mini DSP will get you what you need.
Eric says, do you believe Apple Vision glasses will have an impact on home theaters, maybe together with some enhanced virtual Dolby Atmos headphones? Great question. So Apple did announce, and I think we covered this on a podcast a while back, when Apple came out with their Vision glasses. The concept there is you could watch a movie, wearing these virtual reality goggles. The issue is, sound. I don't think it's going to have an impact on home theaters. The people that are interested in home theater are not going to want to wear goggles. I wouldn't think. I wouldn't. I'd much rather have a projection screen myself. I think that's going to be for a specific audience and a specific market. Yeah, I don't think it's going to have a major impact on home theater for sure. What are your thoughts? Have you seen those, Jonathan?
I haven't seen them in person yet. I've read a little bit about them. I agree with you. Strapping a brick on your head is not the same experience as sitting next to each other on the couches and kind of looking over and smiling and stuff. So I don't see it replacing it personally. We'll see. I mean, what, years, a long time.
What if, like, Jonathan, you and your wife, I mean, you're watching this romantic comedy and I don't know. I mean, it's fun. You're both wearing your glasses and then you're like, I'm just going to reach over and give her a kiss. Dude, you're like going to bang your glasses again. It's going to be awkward. It's not going to work. They're going to get in the way. Jason says, hey, guys, watching from New Zealand. Good to see you, man. Love your content. Appreciate that. My question is, whatever happened to Velodyne? Great question. I've got a Velodyne SPL12 and love it, but they seem to have vanished from the market altogether. So Velodyne goes way back in the day. When I first got into home theater, Velodyne, the CT100 was my very first subwoofer. I worked at Circuit City. I got like 50% off on buying it, and so I bought that. It was a 10-inch with a 100-watt amplifier, real small subwoofer, but it fit my budget. And so over the years, Velodyne just kind of went by the wayside. You didn't hear about them for a long time. I believe they underwent new ownership, so somebody bought them. They were trying to kind of revamp that product. I even reached out to them probably a couple of years ago when I heard about it, and didn't really hear much from them as far as like review units. I was at CEDIA this year. They did actually have a booth, which I was surprised. So they're still in the market. They just aren't doing any marketing, I guess. So I'm not real sure how to answer that, but they haven't vanished totally. I mean, like I said, they were at CEDIA, so that means they're still making speakers or subwoofers. They're still in the market. They just, I don't know what their plan is, to be honest with you. But you definitely don't hear much.
They've got a pretty beastie looking subwoofer on their website. I was unfamiliar with their product line as far as the new stuff, but they got a digital drive Series Plus. It's got an 18-inch driver and 3,000 watt peak amp.
So here's the thing: that DD18 is over 10 years old.
Oh, really? That's the old one.
Oh, yeah. I mean, now they may have made some enhancements or changed the amplifier, but for the most part, I mean, that's still the same subwoofer. And correct me if I'm wrong. Jed says Velodyne sounds like an old exercise bike. That's funny. Yeah, so Andrew Robinson, good to see you. He says, aren't they backed or now owned, distributed by Chevron? I'm not sure who the new owner is. I just heard that they have undergone new ownership. So not really sure who owns them now, but I would love, here's the thing. I think the more products that you guys have available, the consumer wins, so I would love to see Velodyne come back and come out with some really innovative products and make some really great subwoofers, because again, it's not going to be a good fit for everybody. Back in the day, the DD was an absolute beast of a subwoofer. It was the creme de la creme. That was the one to get, but it was so dang expensive. We're talking 20, 25 years ago. And at that time, it was probably $2,000, $2,500. And so that was a lot of money back then. Still is a lot of money. But yeah, it's one of those things that I would love to see them bring out some more products. But time will tell. So, but hopefully with the new ownership, and I think that took place several years ago. So I was kind of hoping to hear from them by now, as far as like, hey, they're making a really big comeback. So we'll just see. He says, for what it's worth, Velodyne has never been good at marketing. So maybe that's part of it. So, well, hopefully with the new guy there, he will at least get creative with the new means of marketing, especially with content creators like yourself and myself, and get those into the hands of some folks that could maybe help them at least share that, hey, this is either a good product or it's not that great of a product. And if it's a great product, then man, that'd be awesome for consumers, for sure. Rocksteady says, hey guys, what's a good device to anchor bookshelf style speakers on the ceiling for Atmos? First disclaimer, be real careful of that. I have my speakers, I've got JTR speakers, and we mounted them to the ceiling, and we did some things to make sure that they're secure. I put extra 2x4s up there that we could screw directly into. We created custom plates for the back of it. But you just got to be real careful that you do that. Depending on the bookshelf speaker, some of the, I'm trying to remember, what is the brand that makes, I think it's the Omni Mount. So they're kind of like a little ball.
Yeah.
And they have threaded like a 1/4-inch thread on the end. Some speakers, bookshelf speakers, if they have like a 1/4-inch thread on the back, that might be a good way. But if you're talking about a big bookshelf speaker, you just got to get creative. Strap that joker down, man. Put some bungee cord, duct tape, whatever you got to do to make sure it doesn't come down. Because if it falls on somebody, man, that's a serious liability.
I think some of the Visa mounts are worth a look, like how you would mount a TV. They have those types of things that you can slide on the back of a cabinet. I will caution this, as you get ready to hang your bookshelf speakers, you'll want to take one of the drivers out and look inside, because before you drill into the back of that enclosure, you want to make sure you're not going to hit the crossover board. So you need to figure out where they mounted the crossover board inside so you don't put a screw through it.
Yeah. And see, I wouldn't even do that. Like, I'm not drilling into my speaker at all. So that's just not how I roll. Now, Ryan, he'll do Swiss cheese. He mounts them up there. He puts like 30 screws in the back of it. He doesn't care. So, but yeah, just be careful. There's not an ideal situation there. You got to get creative, maybe look online. Brian, appreciate the $20 super chat. He said, y'all need to become a Youth Man patron to harass me on Zoom meetings to finish my theater build and to get first dibs on all the leftovers I have for sale. So what he's referencing is one of the new kind of perks that I've offered to my patrons is guys like Brian. He's building his home theater. He's in the he keeps sending me pics. He's like, man, I'm working on this and I've got to do this. I've just updated this. And so he's building out his room and he's bought all of his equipment. But over the past year, he gets a little antsy and he's like, oh, he sees that latest greatest over there. And so he sells what he has. He's never even boxed it, never used it. So he listed his AV10 for a great price in the Patreon. And so that's what he's referring to. And then we do probably 2 or 3 times a month. We do Zoom meetings. So we've got one scheduled this coming up Tuesday. So we'd love to hang out with you guys. But Brian's a great dude. Appreciate all your love and encouragement and support, man. And I can't wait till he gets done because he's building a really, really sweet per listen home theater. He's selling his per listen. Remind me the model number. I think it's RS. I'd have to look it up. But anyway, R7S. No, that's not right. Brian, let me know in the chat what the model number is. Anyway, he's got 8 of those. Per listen just announced their in ceiling R4S. Appreciate it. So they announced their in ceiling speakers. So he's ordered 8 of those, and so he's selling these. He's never even installed them. So, but yeah, that's what he's referring to. So I can't wait to do your home theater tour, man. That's going to be awesome, and it'll be a lot of fun. We'll have you on here. All right, last couple questions here. So David says, do you have any advice on where to buy projectors online? I ordered one through Best Buy, and they shipped it in a damaged product box. It makes me nervous with an expensive item. So the reality is shipping damage can occur with any brand, any manufacturer. Audio Advice sells a lot of projectors. Ryan Charpentier, my business partner, he's a dealer for projectors. I think even like Projector Central. I mean, there's a bunch of places that you can order them through. As far as like who has the best shipping, honestly, I couldn't tell you. Most of the time with a projector, though, they're not going to add extra padding. I mean, literally, the projector is going to be like my NZ 8 came, I guess, about a month ago, and it literally came in the JVC packaging. So it's not like Audio Advice sent me, they boxed it up and added extra stuff. So it really was just dependent on the shipping carrier, the freight carrier, not even freight, because it came regular FedEx or UPS. But it's one of those things where, I mean, you can get damage from any place. So as long as they take care of you, it should be fine. So thoughts on that, Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, it's a scary deal because your projection can get knocked out of alignment. You can have some damage that you don't really exactly know what's happening. It is what it is, man. Like Michael said, you got to file insurance or go back to your dealer if you get a problem and let them take care of you.
Yeah. And I don't think not a lot of now. Sometimes what you can do is if you buy through a dealer, if they're local to you, then you can go pick it up from them. So then but it still has to be shipped from the manufacturer to them. So either way, it's being shipped somewhere. So you've always run the risk anytime you ship something.
I have noticed that their packaging seems to get better. As soon as also these projectors are getting so much heavier too. What's that NZ8 you bought? It's probably like 50 or 60 pounds, right?
50 pounds. But you can see in my unboxing video, it's got some massive padding around all 4 sides.
And it's closed cell foam too, which is a much higher stuff than just the styrofoam that they used to use. So they are making the packaging better, probably because they had problems in the past.
Yeah, and it's double boxed, so at least you got some extra protection there.
The old days, you'd take your $5,000 JVC out of the box, and the styrofoam would be crumbles. It'd just be like, it'd just be all broken up in there. And that didn't give you any fuzzy, warm feelings.
Yeah. Ned Freight, appreciate the $10 super chat. He says, good evening to all. My question is, Panasonic DP UB820K can be fully covered as Blu-ray, HDR, 4K player, Dolby Vision, Atmos, etc. by Xbox X.
This depends on who you ask.
What's his question here?
So he's asking, can all the capability, the HDR tone mapping functions that everyone raves about on the Panasonic be covered by the Xbox Series X?
Okay. I got you.
And just somebody last night at Chris's like barbecue party was saying that the answer is yes, according to him. I don't know. I would tend to answer no, and I'd answer no for several reasons. One, the remote on an Xbox Series X sucks. Every time you put it down, it bumps a shoulder button and fast forwards your movie or anything else. That annoys me to no end. This is a Panasonic remote.
That's a man's remote right there.
It's backlit. You got all the buttons you need, and you can actually hit what you intend to and nothing you don't. The HDR tone mapping is going to be different. And Bob was specifically the one that was saying this. He was saying, hey, look, it's using a really nice HDR tone mapping that's built in at the OS level. So you go in there and you set up your 4K TV and you do the little checker patterns and you make sure it's set up, and that's set up for everything. And then he says, in his opinion, that's better than JVC's tone mapping, and it's better than the Panasonic player tone mapping. What it doesn't do, however, that some people want it to do, and some people would buy the Panasonic for this purpose, is you can make the Panasonic remap HDR to SDR. So you're not even sending your display an HDR picture. and I'm not sure how the Series X would relate to that, because
Yeah.
you could probably just set it to SDR, but I'm not sure if it's doing that as well or not. I haven't seen that myself.
Right.
That's a well-known feature on the Panasonic. If you have an older projector that doesn't even do HDR, that's a really well-known, well-recognized, excellent feature that can do that. I'm not sure the Xbox can replace that. If you just want to spit out HDR and you don't even want to like do anything specific with that, like tone mapping to SDR, then it's probably fine. And you can deal with the controller bumping buttons every time you set it down. It's probably fine. Oh, and then the controller powers down because it's doing a power save. And so if you want to rewind a scene, you have to wait for the power to, no, thanks. I want my remote.
Right. That's funny. So definitely some pros and cons. And so for kind of where he's going, a long time ago, I had the PS, is it 3? I think it was the PS3. So at that time, it was like one of the best Blu-ray players on the market. Not because it did anything better other than like the boot up time. From the time that you put a disc in to the time that you could actually watch the movie, it was so much faster than all the other standalone players. But it's just different. It's a different interface. And I'm just not sure that it's going to do the tone mapping. That would be my biggest thought. I think the Panasonic's going to handle that probably a lot better. So, but it's, it's more expensive too.
This guy says they have an Xbox.
Hey, there you go.
There you go.
Jonathan. You might have to have 2 remotes, man. John's like, yeah, like I want another remote.
I did learn, because that's what they were using last night as the player. I did learn that it can play like ripped MKV files, which is kind of interesting, because a lot of companies, for copyright protections or copyright reasons, won't play that. But apparently Xbox does.
Yeah,
you don't have to hack it or anything.
Val says they actually don't support Dolby Vision for Blu-ray.
Oh.
So if that's important to you, it might not be a good ad. Dave K says, Jonathan, do you stream any movies? I used to only watch physical media, but lately I've been getting digital because it released so much earlier. It seems I've gotten a lot better. Do you think so?
So there's this good enough level, right? I think for a lot of streaming content, it's kind of hit the good enough level, but it's not to the parity level.
No.
And you can go out and you can look at actual graphs on this. Reddit thread has a lot of this kind of thing where they've sampled the streaming version with software that actually measures the peaks and the base frequencies at the lowest end and all this kind of thing. And they plot the graphs of the full movie on streaming versus the full movie on disc. You're missing base content, especially low frequency stuff that they just rip out because I figure most systems can't hear it. So why even put it on the stream? It just takes up extra space, that kind of thing. You're also missing video quality. They compress it down so it's not as big as the original file. So objectively, without a doubt, the physical disc is still the better of the streaming version. However, that whole good enough threshold we talked about, it may be getting there for most people to some degree.
Yeah, I'm going to answer this question. So Bruce says, Michael, does it hurt your feelings that everyone's specifically asking Jonathan questions? Here's the truth. Absolutely not, man. I love surrounding myself with people that are more knowledgeable than myself. And I don't say that like, what do they call that? A humble brag, you know what I mean? If that's even a thing. I legitimately like having people that know more than me because I don't have to be the smartest person in the room. I've got no ego in this thing. I just want to provide the best content for you guys. And if we can have people that know things that I don't know and have experiences that I don't experience, and they could be a benefit to you guys, dude, I'm all about that, man. I'm all about that. Oh yeah. I know you're just having fun with me, but I thought it was funny.
Well, and there's also that thing that we all have different levels of things that we know more about. So you'll answer questions that I don't know the answer to for sure as well.
Yeah. And I'm okay saying I don't know, and that's, and sadly, so Brent, appreciate the $10 super chat. This is one that I'm not going to know. He says he has 3 pairs of outdoor speakers via the Marantz 50 Zone 2, but it sounds kind of dull. Can Sonos port with variable line level connect direct to use a crown amplifier for more punch? So he's thinking he's maybe running out of gas with the Zone 2 amplification to his surround sound speaker. So he's got 6. Oh, so is he splitting? So he's using one zone out. Well, that's a pre-out. So that's unpowered. And then that's going into his Nile. So is the impedance device. I'm assuming it's got
Super specific
amplifications,
question.
right? What's that?
The super specific question. I
Yeah,
don't know the answer off the top of my head either.
I'm thinking now's impedance device. Do you have a model number? Can you drop that? Nedev says, thanks for the great answers. You're better than Chat GPT.
Oh, they're onto our source now.
That's hilarious. Yeah. Jonathan's just over there chatting. I don't know anything, but Chat GPT knows.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
I'm only coming with like volume knobs when I search that Niles impedance device. What are we supposed to be looking at there?
So I'm not sure what that is. He says a Niles impedance device. What is that?
It just looks like a white volume dial that goes in a wall plate from what my Google search is turning back.
Yeah, but that
Sonos port, I can't answer that. Very line level is always nasty. Crown amps are good. I can piecemeal pieces, but I don't know the full equation for the answer here.
Okay, so he says Niles is just a volume controller, not an amp. But what I'm trying to figure out, so I'm assuming you have amplifiers powering that. And so I guess his question is if he adds more power, is that going to fix his issue? It says they just sound kind of dull.
What speakers is he using here? Like, because Dole shouldn't be a power related thing. Dole is an EQ thing or a speaker itself thing. Like if you're saying like these are flat and lifeless, put a little extra EQ at 2000 hertz or 4000 hertz and give it a little bit of life up in that frequency. See if you like that.
Brent, let us know in the chat. I'm watching over here. What speakers are you running out there? Jonathan says more power can definitely open up a speaker though. Yeah, I don't see it. We'll come back to it, Brent. Let us know in the chat what speakers you have. We got that one. John says, so Jonathan, see, Jonathan. All right, guys, y'all have a good night. Jonathan's going to take over from here. So Jonathan, should 105 be a goal for all your home theater speakers to play reference or just the LCRs? Good question. So ideally, all of them, right?
That's up to you. That's up to every person individually. To me, it's important. I want all my speakers to be able to play 105. That's why I went the direction I did, because I want to be able to turn. Nothing's like, in my opinion, this is me speaking subjectively, going in my theater and turning on the Dolby Atmos logo intro and just firing it to 0 and just watching my guests who've never been in a system like that jaws hit the floor. The smiles are a mile wide. It's fun.
Yeah.
If my speakers didn't hit 105, if they stopped out at like 95, it would be less of a smile. That's the bottom line. Sure. And the answer is, if you want that cinema reference experience, then yes, every speaker needs to hit 105 with no compression around the room. That's what that is. The next guy, if you talk to someone else in the chat, they may like, look, that's way too loud. I don't even want to deal with that. I hear this all the time. I heard it this at Chris's barbecue last night. I don't ever go above -15. Yep. I can't stand it that loud. Yeah. Well, then no, you don't need to go 105. If you only want to go 15, if the highest you ever turn your receiver is -15, then you only need to go to 90, right? Because 105 minus 15 is 90 dB. So you would look, in that case, you would do your compression sweeps and you would say, this is the benchmark that I want. I want to hit 90 dB above with no compression. So yes, this answer varies per person.
So going back to Brent's question, he says his main question was, does a variable line level work with a crown amp?
So variable line level to me in generic terms is just a voltage regulation, like a voltage modification up or down. That's what that would typically mean. And absolutely yes, because the crown has an input attenuator that's meant to match with that. But I don't know the specifics of your Sonos or your variable line level. So in general terms, yes. In specific terms, I don't know.
Okay.
But let's take a look and see if we can find that. Variable line level Sonos. Let me Google that and see what comes up. Sonos. Choose port. Choose variable.
I'm wondering if variable line level works to feed a crown amp, or do you have to have a true preamp? The Marantz is currently the power, the outdoor speakers.
So so let's get a little bit technical here because we have to. I'm trying to look for the voltage output on that variable line level on the Sonos. Crown amps a lot of times have a toggle. If it's an RCA input, it has a 0.775 voltage or a 1.25 voltage is oftentimes like a physical switch on the back of a crown amp. Sometimes it'll be in the DSP if it's a DSP version versus a physical switch. But that's saying like, here's our voltage matching. We're going to start at these like general figures. And so if your Sonos can put out one of those two voltage settings, which a quick Google search is not finding that information, but if it can put out 0.775 voltage, which is pretty low, then yes, it can match. You would do your gain would match between those two things.
Yeah.
If it can't, like for instance, Yamaha receivers are traditionally very low voltage output on, especially on the older models. They would have trouble maxing out a pro amp because they couldn't hit that 0.775 voltage. You might need a booster like an Art Cleanbox Pro or something along those lines that boost the voltage that's coming out of your source device so that it can feed the amp to full power. Here's the other side of that coin. You don't need as much voltage as a lot of things have, because that crown amp, for instance, if we're at that 0.775 config we're talking about, it will do full power at 0.775 coming in. So my AV10 that puts out 12 volts rated, it's just wasted. It's already maxed it out at 0.775, and everything over that is just ignored. Basically, it's not going to help. So find out if you can find in your research where your Vari-Line level is, and if it's 1.2, 1.4, 1.0, 0.8, yes, you're probably fine by all accounts.
Now you see why Jonathan answers all the questions. I love it, dude. I love it. So Mike, kind of along that same line, Mikey says measuring outdoor speakers is going to be difficult. No, you could technically measure speakers outside.
Should measure things outside, actually.
You're just going to have think about it. You have a different room. You've got different room interactions. If you've got your speakers, like in my case, they're kind of in I guess under a lanai. So you got a ceiling, you got 3 walls essentially, and then you got an open area back here. So you could still place a mic there and measure it and still get a same frequency response that you would in your theater room. You're just going to have different interactions of the way that sound is bouncing around inside that room. So, but yeah, you could definitely measure them. Different sound floor. Yep. Let's see. Do that one. That one. That one. Cool. Last couple questions here. Dan says, is it possible to do a whole room renovation theater build under 30,000 K USD? Of course. Just depends on your budget, or depends on like what you go with. That is a really, really open-ended question. Are we talking TV? Are we talking projector? Are we talking, a screen? Are we talking building an actual room, construction? Are we talking what kind of acoustic treatment? So a lot of that is going to vary. But if you had $30,000, can you make a really cool home theater? Absolutely. I think you can do a very nice home theater. You're just going to have to figure out and kind of budget out, all right, where am I going to spend that money? How much am I going to devote to my speakers, my subwoofer, my image, whether it's a TV or a projector, acoustic treatment, and all that. Then you got your AVR, a lot of different things that go into that. But yeah, I mean, I'm one of those guys. Here's my philosophy. I think, and I'm an advocate, and I promote this on my channel. I believe that everyone can have a cool home theater.
Yep.
Regardless of your room, regardless of your budget. And at the end of the day, I mean, even Andrew Robinson, he says this a lot. It's like at the end of the day, really all that matters is does it excite you? Do you get excited when you go into your room and you're watching a movie or you're listening to music? And if it puts a grin on your face, ear to ear, and you're enjoying it, then who cares if it was 30,000 or 300,000? You've built something that you can be proud of. And the reality too is down the road, you can always upgrade any aspect of that room. You can buy a bigger subwoofer. You can buy a better projector. You can buy a bigger screen, all those types of things. So, to me, I'm all about the journey. I'm all about get started. I'm all about figuring out what's going to work well for you right now. And then over time, that can expand. So
I think 30,000 is like a tremendous budget to get a good home theater. I mean, let's think about this, Michael. At M-Wave last year, there was an SVS room, 100%. And they said everything in that room was $11,000, if I remember right. That might not be exact, but it was somewhere around that point. That was a remarkable experience for $11,000. That's a third of your budget.
Top tier. That was their pinnacle, prime pinnacle.
Well,
So,
some of the speakers were pinnacle and some were prime.
I think the center, yeah, you're right. The center channel was the ultra, but even then, you're only talking a couple of $1,000s. It's still not.
So then you add some more for seating, and that was maybe or maybe not including the screen, but the screen was a couple $1,000s for maybe $3,000 for an Epson LS 500 or 800 or whatever they had. I mean, you have headroom. If 30,000 is your budget, you can make a really nice theater.
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. So, and feel free to even like shoot us an email. Ryan, he's not here tonight, but he's a dealer. He'll be glad to jump on a call with you and try to just kind of walk through. So if you want to send us an email, midwestavexperience.com/sales, there's a form on there. Just tell us what you're looking at. And like I said, Ryan will jump on a call with you and try to help you kind of walk through what's your priorities and what kind of room, what kind of space, how big is your room, and figure out something that's going to fit your budget. But yeah, I definitely think it's doable. Paul says, hey, I have a quick question. I'm looking at getting new speaker wires to match the gauge of all my wires. Most of my wires are gauge. So do you guys recommend any specific wire? Doesn't matter. I'm of the opinion, for the most part, copper is copper. And I forget what you don't want to get and Jonathan, tell me the correct term, but basically there's some that's like a copper blend of something else.
Copper coated aluminum you want to avoid if you can, or at least get 3 gauges smaller than what you think you need if you do CCA.
Yeah. So, but if you get copper, man, I mean, I'm a big proponent of monoprice, blue jeans cables, super affordable. There's just a lot of it. I run 14 gauge in my room. And that's to everything. I run my LCRs 14 gauge. I do my surrounds, my Atmos. And Mikey says you want oxygen free copper. So yeah, as long as it's copper, man, to me, you're not going to hear a difference. You don't have to spend astronomical amounts on speaker wire. So, and to prove that,
oh yeah,
we actually had Ryan did a pretty cool side-by-side blind comparison using 4 different cables at M-Wave this past year. So, and I'm going to make up the numbers, but it was something like a $6,000 speaker cable to a bookshelf speaker. He had one that was, let's say, I don't know, $1,000, one that was like in the $100 range, $200 range. And then he had a coat hanger. And as Brian mentioned in the chat,
it's like trash metal. It's not even copper.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is the coat hanger was even connected to another kind of janky speaker wire because it wasn't long enough to reach the Storm Audio.
Right. And it's coated with some sort of yellow metal paint polish thing. I mean, that's crap. And
it was terrible. It was terrible. But in every single comparison, he would just have people try to guess like what is the best sounding one. And the coat hanger came in number 1 or 1 of 2 every single time.
Like top 2 every single time.
Yeah, literally. So yeah, just
even there, I think the point would be that it's immaterial. Like that would be like statistical error because you can't tell is the bottom line.
Correct. Yep, exactly.
This website, can you see my screen, Michael?
Can you zoom in, hit Control+?
It's kind of it's
perfect. There you go.
Okay, so this website is called Google it, Roger Russell Wire Table. And this website is so awesome because it has a speaker wire overview and it talks about so many different myths and so many different tests and how to separate like truth from fiction. So if you go to this wire table, this is the bottom line on the left hand side here. It tells you in order for it not to be audible and you're just using 100% copper here, this is what you need for max distances with the impedance. So if you have 14 gauge speaker wire and your speaker is at 8 ohm impedance, you can go greater than 80 feet. So there's no reason to go less than 14 gauge. Bigger wire is smaller gauge is the way it works in the wire world. There's no reason to go smaller than 14 foot at 8 ohm load unless you have longer than 80 foot of speaker wire. So you hear people like, well, I use 10 gauge to be sure. Well, you just wasted your money is what you did because it's not audible.
It's bragging rights, man. You got big, thick gauge. They're a lot harder to work with too. That's the other big thing is when you buy, like I love using banana plugs just because it makes it simple. the bigger the gauge, a lot of times banana plugs struggle with trying to get all those copper strands in there.
Now, here's something else kind of interesting. You know those little cheap speakers that you buy, they always include that super thin wire, right?
Crazy. Yeah.
Now look at this. You shouldn't have more than like it becomes audible at these distances.
Yeah.
So
12
if you
feet.
have like a 4 ohm speaker and you got that little crap wire, you if
Mhm.
over 6 foot of wire, you're gonna hear it. It's gonna
Yeah.
start objectively changing the sound of the speaker, the
And
measurements and everything else. So this is a cool little table, and you can kind of put your mind at rest because most people you don't run 80 foot in most home theaters. And if you do, if you got some sort of giant like Han theater or something, then maybe you do need 12 gauge to go 120 feet, or maybe you do need 200 foot to go, or 10 gauge to go 200 foot, that type of thing. But anyway, there's a whole lot of cool stuff in here. And I really recommend checking out the site, talking about like tricks that they do, misleading wire demonstrations and stuff like that. They have information on some sort of contest that someone's doing to see if anyone could ever determine it. He's giving away a ton of money. It's a really cool site. Roger Russell Wire Table. Google it.
love it. So I'll drop that in the chat. I'm also going to put, these are the speaker wire. I mean, there's nothing fancy about this, guys. I'll show you what I've used for years, and mainly because it's just stinking affordable. So you're talking a 50-foot spool.
Mhm.
Oh, you know what? Why is that 16 gauge? I may have clicked on the wrong one. 14 gauge. Okay. Maybe I dropped the wrong one. Or maybe when I switched to, yeah. Anyway, let me drop this one over here. So copy. So let's try this one. So this is, let me make sure you're still seeing the same thing. Okay.
100 foot of 14 gauge wire is what we're seeing.
Yeah. I mean, 100 foot, 14 gauge, CL2 rated. So if you want to run this in your attic, that's what that CL2 rating is, or run it through your drywall, behind your drywall, $25. I mean, it doesn't get any cheaper than that. If you need, bigger than that, 250 foot, I mean, you're talking $50. If you need 500 foot of it, I mean, we're up to a whopping $93. You know what I mean?
That's the wire I use in my theater as well, Michael.
It's thick. It does the job. Again, there's nothing fancy. This little white jacket right here, it's just white. You know, I mean, it doesn't look cool. It doesn't look fancy. But you're not going to hear a difference between that.
CL rating for fire protection, so it's not going to light on fire if it's exposed. And
yeah, so I mean,
Monoprice has it too. I think mine came from Monoprice, but it looks the exact same.
Yeah, it's the same stuff. So you can get that. Oh, it's funny. So this isn't even Monoprice.
All right, Cables Direct, which is another well-known brand. That's fine. So
either way, but it's the same thing. You're just looking at the gauge. You're looking at it's CL2 rated. So whether it's Monoprice, Blue Jeans cable, I mean, there's just a bunch of brands out there. Don't overspend on copper. That's my little take there. Eric, appreciate the $10 super chat. Got offered a Crown 460 CLS for $75. Is this amplifier still any good for driving Atmos or rear speakers? Thanks as always for a great channel. Appreciate the question, Eric. 460 CLS. Jonathan, are you familiar with that one?
I am web searching it because the answer is no.
CLS. Okay, here we go. I'll pull this up. It's a stereo amplifier. I'll probably have to zoom in because their website is not very friendly. Okay, so we've got 230 watts continuous. It's a 2-channel amplifier. So definitely an old school amplifier.
That looks like a 1980s face from Crown. Is that correct? Does it have a release date on that? It's getting pretty old, man.
No, it definitely is. And you can tell it's old because of the website. I mean, look how small that is. That's like a quarter of the, I guess that's not their website.
I often will say that a Crown will last you 20 years without any problem. You're at 40. If that's 1980, you're at 40 years.
This might be really old. So okay. So what could you recommend that is budget friendly? Maybe $100, $150. Is there maybe a newer Crown amp that you'd recommend?
Yeah. So I mean, he's saying $75. That's so cheap. It might not be that big of a worry. And yes, it will drive your speakers. It looks like it's 240 watts into 4 ohms or 200 watts into 8 ohms. That's plenty of power. However, it is old, and capacitors and all those motherboard things and stuff, they will eventually fail. There
Mhm.
are Crown X, the series that I always recommend to people are Crown XLS,
Mhm.
like 202, 402, 802, and 1602, I think.
Okay.
Those are about a decade old or so,
Yeah.
and they're so cheap on eBay. They just sell for like $100, $125.
Yeah.
And like I say, a Crown, if you guys, Michael will know this from being in the church, like
Mhm.
those church racks are 30, 40 years old, and they've never
Oh,
been, they're covered in
always.
like so much dust that you can
Yeah.
draw a maze on the top, and the
Yeah.
things just work week after week after week, and they're almost always populated with Crown amps or QSC
Yes.
amps, and they
Yeah.
just work. And
Yep.
so
That's
that's
true.
gonna be the same thing for your home. Like you buy something like that, 10
Mhm.
years old, it's just a baby.
Decades. Yeah.
Yep.
So it's a little investment, but if you bought a new one, like you said, it'll probably run you for decades for sure. Yeah, but you're right, because and so in youth ministry, we inherited the old church when they outgrew the building that we were in, the student ministry. They built a big old, $3 million building. So they bought all brand new equipment, left the old junk for the youth ministry, and we used it. And I was there for 13 years
Sure.
and I never changed one of those
Sure.
amplifiers. So like I
Sure.
said, that was probably 25, 35 years old amplifiers, and they were just going strong, man.
Yeah,
So
I'm pretty sure the church we used to go to, the amp rack was from the 1980s, and it just never skipped a beat.
exactly. Let's see. All right. Last couple questions here. Brent says, "Does we got that one?" Boom. Last question. We'll wrap up here, guys. We're right at 2 hours. Travis says, "Have either of you heard a convincing home theater setup built around all in-ceiling speakers? Example: Bowers and Wilkins CCM 7.3s or 7.4s." So I remember going to in Florida. They have a thing called Parade of Homes. So we've lived in this home 17 years, and at the time we had bought this home, it had a media room. So it's just 13-foot wide, 19-foot deep, 10-foot ceiling, empty room. So we went to these parade of homes, and one of them that I went in had exactly what you're talking about. It's probably 5.1 back then. There was an LCR in the ceiling. So you had let's see if I can do this right, left, center in the ceiling, right, and then behind you, two speakers. Maybe there was four. It was terrible. Um, so here's part of the reason. Number one, most people, Jonathan, if you don't mind, look up those CCM 7.3s and 4s.
Sure.
Most in ceiling speakers are aimed straight down. If those speakers are aimed straight down, it's not going to be ideal because there's nothing coming from your visual representation of what's going on the screen. It's coming from top down in front of you. And we know just by looking at measurements, when you get off axis from a speaker, when you're not directly in line with that tweeter where it's firing, it's going to sound worse and worse and worse the further off axis you get. So the caveat of that, can it work? I think it can. And here's the reason. I went to Cedia, and actually I need to edit that video. I'll have that video out probably, well, at least this week sometime. I went into the Anthem Paradigm Room, and one of the demos that they had, they actually did this. They used a demo that were all in ceiling. And honestly, they were pretty stinking convincing. Like I didn't realize I was doing something. I even mentioned it in the video. I was kind of distracted. I was thinking about camera angles and this and that while he was kind of giving his spiel to the audience. And I'm just thinking about what I'm going to do, and what questions I'm going to ask him. And they did the demo, and I did not realize that it wasn't coming from these front speakers up here. And part of how they were able to do that is their speakers are angled towards your listening position, like they're angled right at you. Now, depending on how high your ceilings are, that could definitely, change the way that sounds. But again, it's not ideal because now you're raising the sound instead of being right here where your TV or your projection screen is. Now it's up 8 feet. If you got 10-foot ceilings, now it's up 10 feet. It's just not ideal. Can it work? Yes. So Jonathan, what about those 7.3s? Do they angle at all?
It doesn't look like it, and I'm not in love with these.
Yeah.
If you're looking to buy new, I'm gonna steer you away from them. If you
Okay.
already have them, let's talk about it. So let me share my screen and we'll talk.
Let us know, Travis, in the chat. Do you already own these, or are you just considering these?
So let me go back a page here. This looks like the graphic of these guys. Can you see my screen?
Yep, you're good.
I just have to ask. How about something? Okay, I'm pushing back because I don't know what's happened. So
your right and left arrow, see if it cycles.
Okay, there we go. So here we go. It doesn't look like this is directional, and more to my question mark is looks like they're firing into each other and then just kind of spitting sound out through a combobulated mess. This doesn't look aimable, and it's the same thing we talked about previously tonight when we were talking about compression sweeps. This is a 1-inch carbon facing, whatever that means, soft dome tweeter.
Yeah.
End of the day, that's not going to hit reference, especially when it's not aiming at you. I mean, who knows where it's aiming at that point?
Sure.
If maybe you aim at yourself, but what are these two doing? I don't really understand what's going on with this design.
An interesting design, sure.
Yeah, and so we go to the info sheet and we see that it's 5-inch drivers. 5-inch drivers have trouble doing reference. 1-inch drivers have trouble doing reference. It's only good at it's a low sensitivity, 90 dB sensitivity. I don't think, knowing what this company is, right? They're expensive stuff, and this is custom installation. This is not going to be like something that costs you a couple $100. I think you can probably go a different route, unless you're just in love with this look and you want to have something that matches your, your speaker line. I get it.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to say it outright. I think you can do better for whatever this costs. I don't even know what it costs. Just knowing the name, I know it costs too much for what you're getting. That's my opinion.
Sure. So kind of go along with what Jonathan's saying. So Mikey says, my home in Spring Hill has 7 channels in ceiling in the living room. It's not convincing. I have a Denon 1700H, but it just doesn't work. He said, my theater room is way cooler. So it's just really challenging to do an in-ceiling system that sounds convincing. And the other thing is, if you're going to do Atmos, you can't have Atmos and your surrounds in the ceiling, because now you don't have any separation from your bed layer to your Atmos speaker. So you could only do like a 5.1, maybe a 7.1, but it's just different. It's awkward. So my recommendation, if you need to go, like if you're just trying to keep this as concealed as possible. Yeah. So he says, just with kids and dogs and all, he wants a multi-purpose room feel. Yeah, absolutely. Totally get that. One thing you might want to consider, Travis, can you do in walls on the front? I think that would be a better option than in ceiling for your front LCR, your left, center, and right.
Yeah.
Because again, that sound is coming from and around your TV or projector versus that. And I was going to share this real quick. This is kind of what I was talking about. I don't know if this is the exact model that they had, but you can kind of see how these Paradigm speakers are angled. So the tweeter and the mid-range driver are angled towards your listening position, but they're expensive, for $550. So again, I mean, you may not want to be investing that much. And I'm assuming those other ones might have been used, possibly the Bowers and Wilkins that he was looking at.
As a general rule of thumb, and a couple 5s might, depending on proximity, might get you there. But
yeah,
like mine have four 5.5s, and they get you there. So as you stack up smaller drivers, you can get their reference level. But as a general rule of thumb, if it's like one driver, you need to go all the way up to about an 8-inch driver, generally speaking, before you could even pretend to have reference level in most typical size home theaters. So we're talking 6 feet away, 8 foot away. You need about an 8-inch driver in order, a single driver, we're talking, to hit reference levels, the commercial cinema levels we talked about, in a smaller room. And if you have a big room, you need bigger, right? You need bigger than.
I've got 10-inch drivers for my surrounds and Atmos. So yeah, great questions, man. Had a good discussion here. Definitely appreciate all the questions that you guys have asked, and hopefully, the AV Experience podcast is just a benefit to you, to help build the community, get you guys excited, but also to answer just some practical questions that you have. I'm always grateful for both Jonathan as well as Ryan, to be able to provide their level of expertise in this area, their wisdom, and even just their experiences over the many decades that they've been involved in home theater. So, Jonathan, any closing words before we wrap up, man?
None from me. It was an enjoyable podcast tonight. I like the question ones more.
Yeah.
Myself.
Well, that's ideally what we want to do. I want to make sure that we provide as much value. So a lot of times we'll start off with some kind of topic, but then we just get right into your questions. And so, again, we want to try to be as best of a resource to you. We'd love to have you guys join us for M-Wave. Again, we've got more that we're working on this year to make it bigger, better. June 21st through the 23rd are the dates. So mark that on your calendar. You can check out all the details at midwestavexperience.com. There's videos from last year if you want to kind of see, what happens at M-Wave, and if that's something you want to be a part of. It's in Kansas City, which is where Jonathan and Ryan live in that area. There's just a great resource of folks, and we're going to have multiple home theater tours available this year. So we're excited about that and make that definitely more affordable and open to more people. So I'll be sharing that information hopefully soon with you guys. Well, guys, I hope you all have an incredible week. We'll catch you next Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern time. And if we didn't get your question, hopefully we can get to it next week. Jonathan, appreciate you, brother. Y'all have